The small diner on the corner of Maple Street was quiet, almost too quiet for a Tuesday night. The neon sign above the door flickered faintly, casting a soft glow over the cracked pavement outside. Inside, Laura Carter moved slowly between the tables, her sneakers squeaking softly against the tiled floor. She had been working long shifts lately trying to make ends meet, but tonight felt especially slow. Only a few customers lingered, a truck driver sipping black coffee in the back booth, an older couple sharing a slice of pie near the window, and one young man sitting alone at a corner table. Laura glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and she could already feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. Still, she forced a smile as she approached the last remaining customer. He looked like he didn't belong here, too clean-cut, too out of place in this worn-down diner with its peeling wallpaper and mismatched chairs. His clothes were simple, faded jeans and a plain gray hoodie, but they were neat, as if he'd taken great care to keep them presentable despite their wear. His head was bowed slightly, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold long ago. "Can I get you anything else?" Laura asked, her voice warm and polite, though tinged with the fatigue she couldn't quite hide. The young man looked up, startled, as if he hadn't noticed her approach. His eyes met hers briefly before darting away, and Laura caught a glimpse of something there. Uncertainty, maybe, or sadness. Whatever it was, it made her pause. "No, thank you," he said quickly, his voice low and hesitant. "This is more than enough." Laura nodded, but instead of walking away, she lingered for a moment. There was something about him that tugged at her curiosity, something that reminded her of herself when times were tough. She'd been there before, sitting in a diner late at night, counting coins in her pocket just to afford a cup of coffee. Life had thrown its share of challenges at her, and she knew what it felt like to be invisible, to blend into the background while the world moved on without you. She glanced at his plate. A slice of apple pie sat untouched beside his mug, the whipped cream melting into a sticky puddle. Her heart sank a little. People came to diners like this for comfort, for warmth, for a reminder that someone cared, even if only through a hot meal and a friendly smile. But this man, whoever he was, didn't seem to have much appetite. "You sure?" she pressed gently, leaning slightly closer. "We've got fresh muffins today, blueberry if you're interested." He shook his head, though not unkindly. "I'm fine, really, thank you." But Laura wasn't convinced. She studied him carefully, noting the way his fingers tapped nervously against the edge of the table, the slight slump of his shoulders, beneath his hoodie. Something about him told her he needed more than just food. He needed encouragement, even if he didn't realize it himself. "Well, let me know if you change your mind," she said finally, offering him another smile before heading back toward the counter. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she should do something more for him. Maybe it was the tiredness in his eyes, or the way he seemed so lost in thought. But whatever it was, it stirred something deep inside her, a sense of empathy she couldn't ignore. A few minutes later, as she cleared dishes from another table, Laura made up her mind. She reached into the display case behind the counter and pulled out a freshly baked blueberry muffin, wrapping it neatly in a napkin. Then, carrying it over to the young man's table, she set it down gently beside his untouched pie. "For later," she said simply, meeting his gaze this time. "You look like you could use it." His eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Finally, he managed a small, grateful nod. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the diner's old refrigerator. "That's very kind of you." Laura shrugged, brushing off his gratitude with a wave of her hand. "It's nothing. Just figured everyone deserves a little something sweet now and then." As she turned to leave, she heard him speak again, softer this time. "You don't know how much this means." She stopped mid-step, glancing back at him over her shoulder. "Don't mention it," she replied lightly, though her chest tightened at the sincerity in his tone. "We all need a helping hand sometimes." By the time Laura returned to clearing tables, the young man had begun nibbling at the muffin. She watched him out of the corner of her eye, noting the way he savored each bite, as if it were the first real meal he'd had in days. It wasn't until he stood to leave, sliding a crumpled handful of bills onto the table, that she realized how little he'd ordered, and how little he could afford. "Here," he said awkwardly, pushing the money toward her. "For the tea. And the muffin." Laura hesitated, unsure whether to accept it. The amount was far less than what he owed, but she could see the effort it had cost him to part with those few dollars. Instead of arguing, she gave him a reassuring smile. "Keep it," she said firmly. "Consider it on the house." He opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off with a gentle shake of her head. "Really, don't worry about it. Take care of yourself, okay?" For the first time since he'd arrived, the young man smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression that lit up his face. "Thank you," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, but Laura understood anyway. Some people carried burdens too heavy to put into words, and sometimes all you could do was offer a small act of kindness to lighten the load, even if just for a moment. As he stepped out into the chilly night air, Laura watched him go, her thoughts swirling with questions. Who was he? Where was he headed? And why did he seem so weighed down by whatever life had handed him? She didn't know the answers, and she likely never would. All she knew was that, for a brief moment, she'd been able to make a difference, however small. Little did she know. That single act of kindness would ripple outward in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The next morning, Laura woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. She stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her muscles from another long shift at the diner. Still, she couldn't complain. Working hard was part of life, and she had learned to take pride in it. After getting dressed and tying her hair back into a loose ponytail, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door. When she arrived at Joe's diner, something felt different. There was an unusual buzz in the air, a kind of energy she hadn't felt before. As she approached the front entrance, she noticed a strange sight. Military vehicles lined up along the street outside. Jeeps, trucks, and even a couple of Humvees were parked neatly in rows, their polished hoods gleaming under the morning light. Soldiers in uniform stood nearby, chatting quietly among themselves or checking equipment. It looked like some kind of organized event, but what could it possibly have to do with the diner? Laura hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to go inside or ask someone what was happening. Finally, curiosity got the better of her, and she stepped forward. "Excuse me?" she called out to one of the soldiers standing closest to the door. "Can I help you? What's going on here?" The soldier turned toward her, his posture relaxed but respectful. He was tall, with sharp features and a warm smile that put her at ease. "Are you Laura Carter?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Yes, that's me," she replied, frowning slightly. "Why? Is everything okay?" The soldier nodded. "Everything's fine, ma'am. My name is Lieutenant Ryan. We're here because of what you did last night for Private Brooks." Laura blinked, taken aback by the words. "Private Brooks?" she repeated slowly, trying to piece together what he meant. Then it hit her. The young man from the diner, the one who'd seemed so lost and tired. His face flashed in her mind, along with the memory of the blueberry muffin she'd given him. "You mean Ethan? That's his name, right?" Lieutenant Ryan smiled again, clearly impressed by how quickly she remembered. "Yes, Ethan Brooks. He told us about your kindness last night, about how you went out of your way to make sure he was taken care of even though he didn't have much to give in return." Laura shook her head, feeling a mix of confusion and disbelief. "I didn't do anything special, just gave him a muffin and some coffee. It wasn't a big deal." But Lieutenant Ryan didn't agree. "To you, maybe not," he said firmly. "But to Ethan, it meant everything. He's been through a lot lately. Discharged from the army, no family to turn to, barely enough money to keep moving forward. Your act of kindness reminded him that there are still good people in the world, people who care. And when he shared that story with us, We wanted to show our gratitude." Laura's heart skipped a beat as she glanced around at the soldiers surrounding her. There must have been dozens of them, maybe even hundreds, all gathered outside this tiny diner in the middle of nowhere. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "All these soldiers are here because of me?" Lieutenant Ryan nodded. "That's right. We wanted to repay your kindness in our own way, so we decided to come here, to support you, to thank you, and to let you know that what you did mattered more than you might realize." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as the weight of his words sank in. She had never expected anything like this. All she'd done was offer a small gesture, a muffin, a few kind words, and yet it had sparked something incredible. These soldiers, men and women who dedicated their lives to serving others, were now standing outside her workplace to honor her. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't even know what to say. This is amazing." Lieutenant Ryan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't thank us," he said with a grin. "We're just following your example. Now, how about we grab some breakfast? I hear the pancakes here are pretty good." Laura laughed softly, wiping away a tear. "They are," she assured him. "Let me unlock the door and we'll get started." As the soldiers filed into the diner, Laura felt a surge of nervous excitement. She had served plenty of customers before, but nothing compared to this. The place quickly filled up, every booth and table occupied by uniformed men and women eager to show their appreciation. Some ordered coffee and toast, while others went all out with stacks of pancakes and plates of bacon. The clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation created a lively atmosphere, filling the usually quiet diner with warmth and energy. Throughout the morning, Laura worked tirelessly, refilling cups, delivering meals, and exchanging smiles with the soldiers. Every time someone thanked her or complimented her cooking, she felt a swell of pride, not just for herself, but for the community that had come together to celebrate kindness. Even Mr. Peterson, the diner's gruff but kind-hearted owner, joined in offering free desserts to everyone in uniform. At one point, Ethan himself walked in, wearing his old army fatigues. When Laura spotted him, she waved him over, her face lighting up with recognition. "Ethan," she exclaimed, "I didn't expect to see you here." He smiled shyly, looking both proud and embarrassed. "I couldn't miss this," he admitted. "After everything you did for me, I wanted to be here to say thank you properly." Laura shook her head, brushing off his gratitude. "You already thanked me last night. More than once, actually." "I know," Ethan said earnestly. "But I wanted to do more. You gave me hope when I needed it most, and I wanted to share that with everyone else." He gestured toward the crowded room where soldiers laughed and chatted happily. "This is all because of you." Laura felt her throat tighten as she looked around at the scene. For years she had struggled to keep her head above water, working long hours and sacrificing her own needs to care for her younger brother. Life had been tough, and there were days when she wondered if anyone noticed or cared. But today, surrounded by strangers who had gone out of their way to show their support, she realized she wasn't invisible after all. As the morning wore on, the diner became busier than ever. Word spread quickly about the soldiers' visit, drawing curious locals and reporters alike. Donations poured in from customers and passers-by, many of whom handed Laura envelopes stuffed with cash or checks. By noon, the total amount raised was staggering, enough to cover her rent for months, pay off lingering debts, and even set aside a little savings for emergencies. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. For the first time in a long time, Laura allowed herself to feel hopeful. Maybe things wouldn't always be this hard. Maybe, just maybe, the kindness she had shown to Ethan would continue to inspire others, creating a ripple effect that reached far beyond what she could have imagined. By the end of the day, as the last soldier left and the diner grew quiet once more, Laura sat down at one of the empty tables, exhausted but content. Her feet ached, her arms were sore, and her mind was racing with thoughts of everything that had happened. But despite the fatigue, she couldn't stop smiling. Today had been proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could change lives, including her own. The days that followed the soldier's visit to Joe's diner felt like a dream to Laura. It was as if her life had been turned upside down, but in the best possible way. The diner buzzed with activity every morning, not just because of the usual breakfast crowd, but because word had spread about what had happened. People came from all over town, some to eat, others just to meet Laura and hear her story firsthand. Strangers stopped by to shake her hand, thank her for her kindness, or leave small donations. Even local businesses pitched in, offering discounts on groceries, utility bills, and other essentials to help ease her burden. At first, Laura struggled to accept all the generosity. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and she certainly didn't feel like she deserved it. After all, she'd only done what she thought was right, offering a muffin and a kind word to someone in need. But no matter how many times she tried to downplay her actions, people kept reminding her of their impact. Ethan's commanding officer, Lieutenant Ryan, called her personally to express his gratitude again. "You reminded us all why we serve," he said simply. "Small acts of kindness can change the world." Ethan stayed in touch too, sending letters and texts to update her on his progress. He'd found a job teaching survival skills at a nearby training facility, helping new recruits prepare for their roles in the Army. In one of his messages, he wrote, "I'll never forget what you did for me that night. You gave me hope when I needed it most." His words made Laura's heart swell with pride, knowing she'd played even a tiny part in turning his life around. As the weeks went by, Laura began to notice changes in herself. For so long, she'd been weighed down by stress and worry, juggling endless shifts at the diner while caring for her younger brother, Kevin. But now, with some of her financial burdens lifted, she started to dream bigger. Maybe she thought this was her chance to build a better future, not just for herself, but for Kevin too. One evening, after closing up the diner, Laura sat down at the kitchen table with Kevin. He was 16, bright-eyed and full of potential, but she knew he worried about her just as much as she worried about him. "Kevin," she began hesitantly, "have you ever thought about what you want to do after high school?" He shrugged, stirring sugar into his cup of hot chocolate. "I don't know. Maybe go to college, but..." His voice trailed off and Laura could see the hesitation in his eyes. They both knew how hard it would be to afford tuition, especially with everything else they were dealing with. "Well," Laura said, forcing a smile, "what if I told you we might actually have a shot at making it happen? Things are looking up for us, kiddo. I've been thinking. I want to take some classes myself. Maybe study social work or counseling. If I can help people the way I helped Ethan, maybe I can make a real difference." Kevin stared at her, wide-eyed. "Are you serious? That's awesome, Laura. You'd be great at that." She laughed softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thanks, Kev. I mean it, though. Life's given us a second chance, and I don't want to waste it. Who knows? Maybe one day, you'll be sitting in a fancy office somewhere, working alongside your big sister." Kevin grinned, and for the first time in ages, Laura felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. She enrolled in night classes at the community college, balancing her studies with her shifts at the diner. It wasn't easy. There were late nights spent poring over textbooks and early mornings rushing to get ready for work. But she didn't mind. Every step forward felt like a victory, a reminder that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. Meanwhile, Laura continued to volunteer at the local community center, where she met other veterans like Ethan who were adjusting to life after military service. Many of them faced challenges similar to his, finding jobs, reconnecting with family, or simply readjusting to civilian life. Inspired by Ethan's story, Laura threw herself into helping them however she could. She organized workshops, coordinated food drives, and even set up a mentorship program connecting veterans with local business owners willing to offer employment opportunities. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. One day, as she was packing up supplies after a particularly busy event at the community center, an older woman approached her. Her name was Mrs. Harper, a retired teacher who had lived in town for decades. "Laura," she said warmly, "I've heard so much about you. What you're doing here. It's incredible." Laura blushed, brushing off the compliment. I'm just trying to help where I can. Mrs. Harper shook her head firmly. Don't sell yourself short, dear. You've inspired this whole town. People look at you and see what's possible when you care enough to make a difference. Keep going. You're changing lives. Those words stuck with Laura long after Mrs. Harper left. They reminded her of something Ethan had said during his visit to the diner. You didn't just feed me last night. You gave me hope when I needed it most. Hope. That was what Laura wanted to give others. Whether it was through her volunteer work, her studies, or simply the way she treated people at the diner, she wanted to be a source of light for those struggling in the shadows. By the end of the year, Laura's life had transformed in ways she never could have predicted. She had earned her first certificate in social services, secured a scholarship to continue her education, and built a network of friends and mentors who supported her journey. Kevin, encouraged by her example, applied for a part-time job at the community center, eager to contribute to their shared mission of helping others. Even Mr. Peterson, the diner's owner, noticed the change in her. One chilly December morning, as Laura wiped down the counters before opening, he pulled her aside. Laura, he said gruffly, you've done wonders for this place, and for this town. I want you to know I'm proud of you. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she hugged him tightly. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. That means a lot. As she stood there, surrounded by the familiar sights and smells of the diner, Laura realized something important. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, struggles she couldn't foresee, but she was stronger than she'd ever believed, and she owed it all to a single moment of kindness, a blueberry muffin offered without expectation, and the ripple effect it had created. For Laura, the past few months had been proof that even the smallest gestures could spark something extraordinary. Now, as she looked toward the future, she knew one thing for certain. She would spend the rest of her life paying it forward, ensuring that others felt seen, supported, and loved, just as she had helped Ethan that quiet Tuesday night. A year had passed since the day hundreds of soldiers showed up at Joe's diner to thank Laura for her kindness. In that time, Laura's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a student, a volunteer, and a role model for her community. Her nights were spent studying social work at the community college, while her days were filled with helping others, whether it was serving meals at the diner or organizing events at the community center. Every step she took felt like a piece of a puzzle falling into place, shaping her into the person she was always meant to be. Kevin, her younger brother, had grown too. With Laura's encouragement, he'd started taking his future seriously, working hard in school and saving money from his part-time job at the community center. Together they dreamed of a brighter tomorrow, one where they wouldn't have to worry about bills or debt, where Kevin could go to college and Laura could build a career helping people who needed it most. For the first time in years, their struggles felt less like weights holding them down and more like stepping stones leading them forward. One crisp autumn morning, Laura received an invitation in the mail. It was addressed to her in neat handwriting, with a return address she didn't recognize at first. When she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. The letter was from Lieutenant Ryan, inviting her to attend a special ceremony honoring individuals who had made a difference in the lives of veterans. She was being recognized for her contributions to the community, alongside Ethan Brooks and several other civilians who had gone above and beyond to support those who served. Laura read the letter over and over, her hands trembling slightly. She had never thought of herself as someone worthy of recognition. To her, everything she did was simply part of living a good life, helping others because it was the right thing to do. But now here was proof that her actions mattered, that they had touched lives far beyond what she could see. On the day of the ceremony, Laura dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy blue dress and tying her hair back neatly. Kevin teased her, gently, as she fussed with her appearance in front of the mirror. "You look great, Laura," he said with a grin. "Stop stressing." She laughed nervously, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles in her dress. "I'm not used to this kind of thing, you know. What if I trip on stage or forget what to say?" "You'll be fine," Kevin reassured her, giving her a quick hug. "Just be yourself, that's all anyone expects." When they arrived at the community hall where the ceremony was being held, Laura was overwhelmed by the turnout. Dozens of people filled the room, including familiar faces like Lieutenant Ryan, Ethan, and many of the soldiers who had visited the diner months earlier. There were also local officials, reporters, and families of veterans, all gathered to celebrate acts of kindness and service. Laura felt a lump form in her throat as she scanned the crowd, realizing how much her life had intertwined with theirs. The ceremony began with speeches from various speakers, each one sharing stories of resilience, sacrifice, and gratitude. Finally, it was Laura's turn to step onto the stage. As she walked up to the podium, the room erupted into applause. Her cheeks flushed red, but she forced herself to smile and wave before adjusting the microphone to her height. "Thank you," she began, her voice shaky at first but growing steadier as she spoke. "I honestly don't know what to say. I never expected any of this when I gave a muffin to a stranger at the diner last year. All I wanted to do was help someone who seemed like they needed it. I didn't realize that such a small act could lead to so much." She paused, glancing around the room at the sea of faces watching her. "What I've learned since then is that kindness doesn't have to be big or flashy to make a difference. Sometimes it's the smallest things, a kind word, a warm meal, a moment of understanding that can change someone's life. And sometimes those moments ripple outward, touching more lives than we ever imagined." Her eyes found Ethan in the audience, sitting near the front with a proud smile on his face. "Ethan taught me that," she continued. "He reminded me that even when life feels overwhelming, there's still good in the world, and we can all play a part in creating it. So to everyone here today, I want to say thank you. Thank you for reminding me why it's important to care for one another. Thank you for showing me that no matter how tough things get, we're stronger together." As she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause once again. Laura stepped back from the podium, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't planned to cry, but tears streamed down her face as she returned to her seat. Kevin hugged her tightly, whispering, "That was perfect, Laura, you nailed it." After the ceremony, Laura mingled with the guests, shaking hands and exchanging hugs with people she'd met over the past year. Lieutenant Ryan introduced her to some of the higher-ranking officers in attendance who praised her efforts and promised to support her future endeavors. Ethan pulled her aside for a private conversation, his expression serious but kind. "I owe you so much," he said quietly. "You saved me that night, Laura. Not just with the muffin, but with the way you treated me with dignity and respect. I'll never forget that." Laura shook her head, brushing off his gratitude. "You saved me too, Ethan. You reminded me that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be standing here today." Ethan smiled, nodding in agreement. "Well, I guess we saved each other then." As the evening wound down, Laura reflected on how far she'd come in just 1 year. From struggling to make ends meet at the diner to standing on stage accepting an award, she had transformed her life in ways she never thought possible. But more importantly, she had discovered her purpose: to help others, to inspire hope, and to remind people that they weren't alone. In the weeks that followed, Laura threw herself even more deeply into her work. She graduated from her social work program with honors, earning praise from her professors for her dedication and compassion. With her new qualifications, she secured a position at a nonprofit organization focused on supporting veterans and their families. It was a dream job, allowing her to combine her passion for helping others with her admiration for those who served. Kevin, inspired by his sister's success, applied for scholarships and was accepted into a state university. On the day he received his acceptance letter, Laura cried tears of joy, knowing how hard he had worked to get there. "We did it, Kev," she said, hugging him tightly. "Together, we made it through." Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty, but Laura faced them with a newfound confidence. She knew she couldn't control everything, but she could control how she responded to adversity. And she chose to respond with kindness, empathy, and determination. One evening, as she closed up the diner after another long shift, Laura paused to look out the window. The neon sign flickered faintly, casting its familiar glow over the empty street. She thought back to that quiet Tuesday night a year ago, when a young man named Ethan had walked in, tired and lost, and how a single act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction that changed both their lives forever. Laura smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Life had given her a second chance, and she intended to make the most of it, not just for herself, but for everyone whose path crossed. Hers, because in the end, that's what kindness was all about. Lifting each other up, one small gesture at a time. Years had passed since that quiet Tuesday night at Joe's Diner, when Laura Carter gave a muffin to a struggling young man named Ethan Brooks. What started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far greater, touching the lives of countless people and shaping Laura's journey in ways she could never have imagined. Now, standing on the stage of a packed auditorium, Laura looked out at the sea of faces before her and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was no longer just a waitress or a student. She was a leader, an advocate, and a symbol of hope for her community. The event was a fundraiser hosted by the nonprofit organization where Laura now worked. It was dedicated to supporting veterans and their families, providing resources like job training, housing assistance, and mental health counseling. The room buzzed with energy, filled with volunteers, donors, and beneficiaries of the program. Many of the attendees were familiar faces: soldiers who had once visited the diner, local business owners who had supported Laura's efforts, and even Lieutenant Ryan, who had become a close friend over the years. But there were also new faces, people inspired by Laura's story and eager to contribute to the cause. As Laura prepared to speak, she took a moment to reflect on how far she'd come. Her life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt, but she had built something meaningful. She had turned her struggles into strengths, using them to connect with others who faced similar hardships. And, most importantly, she had stayed true to the values that guided her: kindness, empathy, and resilience. Taking a deep breath, Laura stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent as she began to speak, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I first stood on this stage a few years ago," she said, glancing at the audience, "I talked about how a single act of kindness can create ripples. Back then, I didn't fully understand what that meant. I thought it was just a nice idea, something to make us feel good in the moment. But now, looking back at everything that's happened since, I realize those ripples are real, and they're powerful." She paused, scanning the crowd. Her eyes landed on Ethan, sitting near the front with his wife and 2 young children. He smiled warmly, nodding in encouragement. Laura continued, "Ethan reminded me that everyone carries burdens we can't always see. Sometimes all it takes is one small gesture, a kind word, a listening ear, or yes, even a blueberry muffin to remind someone that they matter. That's what I did for him that night at the diner, and that's what he and so many others have done for me ever since." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement. Laura went on to share stories of the people she'd met through her work: the veteran who found a stable job after months of unemployment, the single mother who received help finding affordable housing, the teenager who discovered purpose through mentorship programs. Each story was a testament to the power of compassion and community, proof that even the smallest efforts could lead to lasting change. "But here's the thing," Laura added, her tone shifting slightly. "Kindness isn't just about helping others, it's about creating a cycle. When someone shows you kindness, you carry it with you. You pass it on, whether you realize it or not. That's what happened to me. Ethan's gratitude inspired me to keep going, to do more, to dream bigger. And now, seeing all of you here tonight, I know that same spirit lives in each of you." The room erupted into applause, and Laura felt tears welling up in her eyes. She hadn't planned to cry, but the weight of the moment was overwhelming. For years, she had fought to overcome her own struggles, often feeling invisible and insignificant. Now, surrounded by people whose lives she had touched, and who had, in turn, touched hers, she understood that no act of kindness was ever wasted. Every effort mattered, no matter how small. After the ceremony, Laura mingled with the guests, thanking them for their support and sharing hugs with old friends. Kevin, now a college graduate working as a teacher, stood proudly beside her, introducing her to some of his former students who had benefited from the nonprofit's programs. "This is my sister," he said with a grin. "She's the reason I believe anything is possible." Laura laughed, playfully nudging him. "Don't give me all the credit, Kev. You've done amazing things too." Later that evening, as the crowd began to thin out, Ethan approached Laura with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember what you told me that night at the diner?" he asked softly. "You said we all need a helping hand sometimes." Laura nodded, smiling faintly. "I remember." "Well," Ethan continued, "you gave me mine. And now, thanks to you, I've been able to give mine to others. That's the legacy you've created, Laura. You've taught people how to pay it forward." His words stayed with Laura long after the event ended. As she drove home under the starlit sky, she thought about the ripple effect Ethan had mentioned, the way one act of kindness could inspire another, creating waves of positivity that spread far beyond what anyone could predict. She thought about the soldiers who had shown up at the diner, the donations that had poured in, the friendships she had formed, and the lives she had helped transform. All of it traced back to that single muffin, offered without expectation on a quiet Tuesday night. Over the years, Laura continued to dedicate herself to her work, expanding the nonprofit's reach and advocating for policies that supported veterans and marginalized communities. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story at conferences and events across the country. But despite her growing recognition, she remained humble, always remembering where she came from. To her, success wasn't measured by awards or accolades. It was measured by the number of lives she could touch and the amount of hope she could spread. Kevin, meanwhile, followed in his sister's footsteps, becoming a passionate advocate for education and youth empowerment. Together, they proved that resilience and determination could break cycles of hardship, paving the way for brighter futures. Their bond grew stronger with each passing year, rooted in mutual respect and shared dreams. One day, while sorting through boxes in her attic, Laura stumbled upon an old photo album. Flipping through its pages, she found a picture of Joe's diner, taken shortly after the soldiers' visit. In the image, she stood outside the diner, surrounded by uniformed men and women, her face glowing with joy. Beside her was Ethan, holding a plate of pancakes, while Kevin peeked out from behind the counter, grinning mischievously. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she stared at the photo, memories flooding back. That moment had changed everything. Not just for her, but for everyone involved. It was a reminder that life's greatest gifts often came in unexpected forms, disguised as challenges or coincidences. And it was proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could leave a lasting impact, shaping destinies and inspiring generations to come. Closing the album, Laura placed it gently back in the box. She glanced around the attic, taking in the mementos of her journey, the certificates, letters, and photos that told the story of her transformation. Then, with a soft smile, she headed downstairs, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Because no matter what challenges arose, she knew one truth would always remain. Kindness was a force more powerful than any obstacle. And as long as she kept giving it freely, the ripples would continue to spread, reaching hearts and changing lives, one small gesture at a time.